Hello, collective listeners. Today's episode is going to be a little bit different. We'll get into it during the episode, but I am today's guest. Ta-da. That's what I'll leave you with. And thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy. What's going on, collective listeners? Today's episode is going to be a little bit different. So, our editor, Stephanie, who's amazing, by the way. I do want to shout out Stephanie. One, she has to deal with me when I forget the simplest instructions that she gives me. So, thank you, Stephanie, but also does a fantastic job of all the social media posts and everything. So, shout out to Stephanie. Came up with a great suggestion inspired by the Talking Shop podcast, Coach Big Toe, which is now a Samson Sweet podcast. So, sponsored by Samson. Fantastic podcast out there with Coach Big Toe in Northwestern. The idea and what he did was recap 3 lessons learned in 2023 with a bonus lesson. Stephanie came up with the idea and the thought that maybe I could kind of introduce myself because, I've been hosting for a little over 6 months now, I believe, and I haven't really broken down my history or what I do. And then maybe some lessons learned in 2023. And so my plan for today and what I want to do is go over exactly who I am. I'm sure I'll repeat some things you've heard over the podcast as I've talked with guests. 3 lessons I've learned in 2023, and then 3 things that I want to work on for 2024, because I think continuing to improve is always a really, really big thing within strength and conditioning. So without further ado, I'll be the guest on today's episode. So the first thing I want to break down was my background. I started out as a 3-sport athlete, football, wrestling, and track and field. Football, I've made the joke before, I was going to go to the NFL, all pro, 10 years, retire, have the career that Brian Bosworth wanted. But that was obviously not the case. I got too many concussions, so I actually couldn't play football after my sophomore year. I loved wrestling, wasn't very good at it. And then track and field was probably the only thing I was very good at. So that's what really inspired my love for the weight room, was learning that basically you put in exactly what you put in, you get out exactly that product of what you put in. So it was a really cool area for me because I learned very quickly that what I did and the work that I put in is exactly what I got out of it. So it was very nice for me to learn that lesson at a younger age. And so I kind of fell in love with the weight room. And then I went to school at Temple University. This is a funny story for anybody who may not have heard it. I was a pre-med major. I was going to be an orthopedic surgeon, make millions of dollars, and retire my parents in Aruba. These lofty dreams always end up kind of not working out. But I'm sitting in calculus one day. It's the first day. I absolutely just have no clue what's going on the board. And then our professor says that everything on the board is review, and we should know this already. And at this point, I thought she was talking a different language. So I stood up out of that class. I actually just left in the middle of the class. And it was small, so it was kind of awkward. Like, it wasn't like just, me leaving a 100-person lecture. It was like 15 people in there. So I leave calculus. I go over to my academic advisor, and I'm like, what can I do? And she says, well, what do you like doing? I said, I like working out. That's what I like doing. And so she said, we actually have a great exercise science program here. And we did. And I signed up that day, switched my major. My mom cried. She was not very happy about that. I've mentioned before, my family is a very big academic family. So the switching from being a doctor to a weights guy was not very well received. But ultimately, it worked out in the end. And so that's when I started my journey of becoming a strength and conditioning coach. I still wasn't 100% positive that it was exactly what I wanted to do going into my master's degree. So I ended up signing up for sports psychology. Now, this is, if anybody here is listening who is an intern right now and has not gotten their master's degree, absolutely don't do what I do. It worked out for me, but my student loan payments are absolutely insane right now. Please get a GA. Please get your school paid for. That makes a massive difference on every level for the rest of your life. Just heed that advice if that's the only thing you'll listen to during this podcast. And so I left and went to University of Tennessee. I interned. At the time, prior to that, I was with UPenn, which was combined football and Olympic. I was really fortunate to go to the New York Jets for their training camp. I grew up a Jets fan. I got to meet guys like Nick Mangold, Antonio Cromartie, people who I idolized. I was meeting in person. So obviously this grew my love for the profession. I thought it was so cool that I could be on the side of things that most people just get to watch and they're on the outside of it. So it made me feel like an insider. It made me feel really cool, and I like the working out aspect. I like the weight room aspect. So it kind of all just fit in for me. And then I interned while at the University of Tennessee with the Olympic side. Switched over to football. Stayed there long enough that they called me a GA. Did not pay me money, which is classic for strength and conditioning, but absolutely loved my time there. And then was hired on as a part-time assistant at the Olympic side back at University of Tennessee. And so there I worked with cheerleading, and I was basically the assistant strength coach for every other sport, which was a fantastic experience. It really taught me a lot. I gained a lot of experience through that I don't think I would have if I went to other positions or if I had just stayed in football. And then from there, I made connections that got me my first job at Texas Tech, working with women's basketball. And I've made the joke a million times. We don't have to beat you over the head with this. I suck at basketball, and so that was a really really cool experience for me to go out to Texas Tech, make mistakes, um, be a part of a staff that allowed me to make mistakes and kept me on for the next year and allowed me to grow as a coach and allowed me to get better and allowed me to understand the game of basketball in a way I really never have before. And it's so interesting. People always ask me, like, do you want to go back to football? Because I played football. I was a GA at Tennessee. I did all the things that you're supposed to do if you want to be a football strength coach. And my answer is hell no. And it's just because the time at Texas Tech and my time here at App State has just allowed me to grow a certain appreciation and a certain love of the game of basketball. I think it's so beautiful when you watch it and when it's done correctly. Obviously, you don't get the result you want every single time from your team, but being able to watch basketball, being a part of this environment has been like no other. So I'll always be in basketball. Um, and then after Texas Tech, my family moved to North Carolina. I wanted to be closer to them, and I had an opportunity to open up at App State. So I came over to App State, where I'm currently at. I work with men's and women's basketball and women's golf. Um, the balance of the positions can be tough sometimes, but I truly love it. I love working with both sides. And the benefit that nobody ever talks about having multiple teams is when one team is like driving you nuts, you just go to the other team. Like you're not like stuck with that team and then just like stuck thinking about it. You go to the other team, they cheer you up, and you get super excited. Now the detriment that nobody else always talks about is both teams can't be doing well at the same time. It's some sort of rule or some sort of cosmic or karmic type situation for strength and conditioning where if your men's team is really doing well and they're really happy with where they're at in the weight room, the women's team is going to be bothering you, and it's going to be completely flip opposite. uh, and so it just it can drive you nuts sometimes, but it can also provide relief. So it's an interesting position, but I love it. Here I work with our GAs as well on development for what they do, and it's a really fun process. It's probably my favorite part about strength and conditioning is actually developing interns, developing GAs. I like teaching. I like showing people, and a very critical class I took when I was in seventh grade, I think it's eighth grade, was a critical thinking class. It was literally called critical thinking. And our teacher just talked to us about like everything isn't as it appears to be. And so you have to actually think and understand and look through each detail and then make your own opinion about it. And don't let others make opinions for you. And so my favorite part of this job is teaching other strength coaches that what I do is not the only way to do it. And in fact, it's one of a million ways that are all going to be successful. What their job is to do is to figure out what they like and what it allows them to execute their weight room, their coaching on a daily basis in a way that they think will be successful and they enjoy doing it. And so that's something I really, really like about this job here is I get to work with our GAs who are young coaches. I have interns who work with just me, and we go over a lot of things that I really enjoy teaching them about. And so it's a great position, and I love it here. Um, the other things I guess you should be aware of is I do post TikToks. I post on Instagram Reels. I like to post funny videos. I like to not take strength and conditioning as seriously as some others take it. I think it's a very serious job, and I'll never take light or not take into account the fact that we're helping athletes develop on a daily basis, and a lot of what they want to do in the future is determined on what we teach them or the habits we help them create. But at the same time, I wear basically pajamas every single day to work, and I get to lift whenever I want. So if you take those 2 points into account, you understand you have a pretty cool job. Now, there's always extenuating circumstances for other people, but at my current point and current position, I love posting videos about how fun the job can be. I love posting and talking about the great things about strength and conditioning because I think there's too much negative stuff out there. I think the negative voices can sometimes be the loudest. So my hope is to be more of a positive voice. If you have any personal questions, just reach out to me. TikTok, Instagram, Strength Coach Connor is the handle. So anything that you want to know about me that I didn't mention, feel free to reach out at any time. Also follow me. That helps me get sponsorships and things like that. So that's pretty cool. Now on to 2023. What are the three things that I learned the most from in 2023? Listening to the Talking Shop podcast, it was really interesting to hear his perspective on certain things. And to me, what I've noticed is that a lot of coaches go through different points in their career. Um, they understand at certain points how much they can affect a team. They understand at certain points how much they can't affect a team. Uh, you know, it's so interesting because you see, I've changed my mind on a million things a million times, and I will continue to do that for the rest of my career. But other coaches do it too. It's not just something that I go through. And so I think it's nice to hear that and to understand, like somebody like Coach Big Toe, as they call him, what he's gone through and how he's changed his opinion. So, I think the biggest thing that stuck out to me is the impact that the strength and conditioning coach can make. Um, I was asked yesterday, how much like does a strength coach really impact the game? And my answer was how much you're willing to accept credit for. Because if you accept credit for a lot of things, then you're going to be willing to accept blame for a lot of things as well too. So I don't like to accept credit for a lot of things. I like to kind of take a step back and just say, hey, like the joke, and everybody on the staff, on both men's and women's staff here, always just says, hey, just a guy. Because as soon as somebody tries to give me a compliment or anything, I say, hey, man, I'm just a guy. And I think it's a way of, if we're being honest, kind of deflecting and minimizing my impact. And I think the reason I do that is because I get a little bit worried about accepting blame for when things don't work out. And I don't think that's really how I wanted to live this past year. And I think that's something that I improved upon. I think that's why it's my first lesson of 2023 is that you can make an impact. And so the specific example I have along with it is our women's basketball team. That's an amazing group of young women who I love working with on a daily basis. One of the most frustrating things I would see from them last year is we would get to the fourth quarter and they would shut down. As soon as we saw any type of adversity or things didn't go our way, and everybody knows the famous saying that basketball is a game of runs. There's momentum swings constantly, so it's not always going to go your way. Even when you're up 30, a team can come back, hit a couple threes, and now all of a sudden it's cut to 15, and you're nervous about it. And so how do you deal with adversity? How do you respond to those things? And so I've always talked to other coaches, and I'm sure a lot of people listening here may even disagree with this point, but like the joke was like, we always try to do these like mental toughness workouts. It doesn't actually work. It doesn't do anything. And I would say that it does. I would say the workouts that you do can improve somebody's ability to handle adversity. And I remember specifically we're in a meeting with our entire women's basketball staff, and it was funny because I got hired in July, and our women's coach is like, "We didn't do any hard things last year in the spring. We didn't push sleds. We didn't flip tires." Like kind of like yelling at me, and then she's like, "And I know you weren't here last year," and then kind of like backed up. So it's just a funny little anecdote, but that's what she wanted in this offseason. She wanted to do hard things, and so we created the concept of fourth quarter Fridays, and it was executed by myself, the coaches, and then the assistant strength coach Patrick Brooks, and the concept was essentially to create a really hard day where they would have to push through and they'd have to rely on their teammates to push through. And so we created the fourth quarter Friday, and it would be at 6 a.m. because it was a time that sucked. And then secretly, also, they would have the rest of the day off after we finished, which was kind of nice. It was kind of like 3 days off, but they usually kind of only focused on the workout piece, which I understand. But we created the fourth quarter Fridays, and I watched this team that was shut down in adversity slowly get better and better at handling these things, handling difficulties, handling when I would be a jerk and say, hey, we got overtime on top of it today. Things that I saw would shut them down before now become just slight bumps in the road or things that they don't even blink at. And so I think my biggest lesson from that was I really can make an impact. I can be a person who can show people that they can do hard things. And that's my job as a coach, is to not take them outside of their comfort zone. I mean, well, it is to take them outside of their comfort zone, not outside of their limits though. And show them that, they can do hard things. They can be successful in life. And that's kind of the whole point of our job. And so that was kind of my biggest lesson learned, is that you can make an impact. Don't minimize the impact that you can make because you're worried about accepting the blame for certain things. Be happy about what you can do to make an impact on the athletes. And, um, you don't have to accept credit for every single thing, but amongst yourself, when you have conversations at the end of the day, or when you're laying in bed at night, you're thinking about the day and you're going through exactly what you did, understand that you can make an impact, and then what you do does matter. Um, and I think it's kind of reinvigorated my love for strength and conditioning as well too, because I love it when it's a challenge. I love when we're at that point where you can see you either go left or you go right with an athlete. They're either going to learn how to deal with it, or they're just going to back down and struggle with the adversity piece for the rest of their career. Um, and so it was very fun for me to work in conjunction with our staff, in conjunction with the other athletes, and help our women's team develop that skill. And this is just a cool little anecdote. We were down, I think it was like 22 to start the fourth quarter against Ohio earlier this year. And that was a game that we absolutely would have not even tried in the fourth quarter last year. And we came back and won it. And now, again, I don't want to accept the credit piece for that, right? I don't want to accept and say, yeah, it was because of the fourth quarter Fridays that we did. How cool is that? I don't really care about that. But to see that we had a team that at least faced adversity and didn't shut down, to me was a really big highlight of the year. And so that's why it's my biggest lesson. The second lesson, a lot of these are kind of based off of mistakes I've made too. The second lesson is you have to coach your interns. And that sounds like so basic. It sounds so simple, but um, I made a mistake this past year. And so it goes exactly into one of our fourth quarter Fridays. We had an intern, Pat, who was absolutely amazing. Like, I call him the assistant strength coach because that's what he really provided for the team. Um, and I thought I was doing my job because we did the continuing education piece. And so he was trying to pass his CSCS. So we go through every single chapter and we talk about it, and we went, page by page about what exactly would be coming up on the test, what he might need to know. And he passed the test. And, so to me, I was like, I was a successful intern program. And so, at the end of the year, it was a July time frame. He was going to go leave to be a GA. And I said, hey, man, why don't you take over one of the fourth quarter Fridays? Like, why don't you run the whole thing? And he was nervous about it, but I'm like, dude, you're going to do a great job. And so then he comes out and it didn't go well. And so I got upset, because I'm sitting there and I'm like, man, like, you're going to go coach your own teams. Like, and this is, it's not going well. And that was a moment where I stepped back and especially in a conversation with my fiance too, I was like, man, I failed. That was not a failure at all on Pat's side. It was a failure on my part because we were doing the continuing education piece. Never once did I have him run like more than a warm up. And so I feel horrible. Like, now that I look back at this, I had this guy run like an in-place warm-up a couple times. And then all of a sudden I say, okay, by the way, one of the biggest focuses for our women's basketball team this year is our fourth quarter Friday. You're going to run the whole thing and you're going to do it with zero hesitation. Um, and so, of course, it didn't go well because I didn't give him the opportunities to coach. I didn't let him run a separate lift that wasn't kind of this big, built-up deal. Um, and that was my fault. And so that was something that was very difficult for me to understand, was that you have to coach your interns and you have to give them opportunities to grow. And especially if you're like me, who's a control freak, and I want everything to go through me and be done exactly the way I want it to be done, you're not going to develop your interns. You're not going to develop the people who came to you for development. And like a lot of schools, we can't afford to pay our interns. And so these people are coming to us, working for us. And I didn't do my biggest piece, which is to help them grow as a coach. And so that was another lesson learned, is you have to give them opportunities to coach. You have to give them opportunities to fail first before you give them the biggest possible opportunity that they can see. And that was a difficult lesson for me to learn, but man, am I grateful to Pat for one. He tried to take the blame on himself because he's a great dude. And then, it just ended up where it's this deal where we talk about it to this day. He's like, I never forget that day. And I'm like, I don't forget that day either because I'm the one who messed up. He's like, no, I messed up. We just go back and forth. But, I think that was an eye-opening lesson for me as well too, is that for people who are deciding to come to see you, come to work for you, and come to be a part of your program, is that it's not something that you should take lightly. It's not something that you should forget to do certain things, because you can make or break somebody's career. And so what if that one day, I think it's a little dramatic, but what if that one day he did horrible and then he loses all confidence and doesn't want to be a coach anymore? That would be on me, in my opinion. So, my next lesson is you have to coach the interns. And then the third lesson of the year is don't get caught in the rut. Um, I think it was so easy for me going into year two to have my program set and understand that this was my first summer where I like truly didn't have to worry about changing my license, changing my car registration, moving, doing all the things that you get caught up in when you're changing schools, and just like, man, I just want to go, enjoy life and, um, kind of come in and coach and then leave. And I think that made me lose my creativity for coaching. I think that made me really struggle with coming in and enjoying every single day, and understanding that you were the tone setter for the lift. You're the person who can make a great lift or lose it. And so it was a really kind of a struggle for me this past year to pull myself out of the rut of like, I've already got an established program. It's worked before with past teams. So I'm just going to run this program again and go in and coach, and then we'll leave. Right. And I see things like Wisconsin football spent, X amount of dollars on lights, and everybody was roasting them on Twitter. And I'm like, man, well, I mean, that'd be pretty cool though. Like to have a weight room that lights up like a club, like the guys would get excited to do it, and like the midnight madness lifts and all these things that make the job fun for you. I think I forgot to do. And so my goal, and this is it's a lesson learned, and I improved upon it during the year, and I tried to do more fun things. But my goal for this next year too is just to like do things that are fun for you as a coach too, because the more fun you're having as a coach, the more fun the athletes are having, and the better environment it's going to be for them to train. And it doesn't mean like you're not working hard if you're having fun, but like doing like different location lifts because it's the millionth Friday that we've been training in the summer. And instead of trying to do like this volume blast that's going to absolutely crush the guys, and then they come back in on Monday and we train in the same spot, change up the location, go to different places, have a themed lift day, like all the things that like people kind of make fun of, I think are kind of like the fun parts of strength and conditioning. And one of the coaches at Texas Tech, she works with soccer and volleyball there. She does like an Easter lift. And so you go open up Easter eggs, and then you look at a specific lift. It's like 10 push-ups or something like that. Like smaller things like that, just like make it more fun to come in on a daily basis. It makes it more fun for the athletes to come into, and it just makes it a better training environment overall. So don't be afraid to take risks is what I would say as I learned from this past year. Now going into 2024, there's a lot of things I want to work on. There's a lot of things I want to change, a lot of things I would like to do better. So it's kind of hard to narrow it down to three, but the first one is really cool experience. So our director here, Robbie Ormsby, came to me, and I remember he had Starting Strength on his desk, and I just saw it, and I was like, man, that's the first book I ever read in strength and conditioning. And that was actually a lie. The first book I ever read was Arnold's Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding, and I almost gave myself rhabdo because I didn't understand that all these bodybuilders were taking special vitamins, as Ronnie Coleman would call them. And so the second book I read was Starting Strength by Mark Ripito. And so he came up with the idea that this summer we'd fly down to Wichita Falls and take the Starting Strength certification exam. I'm really excited to do it. And I think the biggest thing I want to work on for 2024 is coaching up technique. Like I think I've used kind of a fake excuse a little bit in the past of, how much does technique really matter? Like if it's good, like that's I obviously want good technique. I don't want guys like having horrible technique on lifts, but if it's good technique, like I don't really coach it up that much more to make it perfect. And then Seth Thompson, just a couple months ago, said your rep is your reputation. That one really rung true to me, and I've thought about it since, and I just look at our lifts and I think like, man, that's good, but can we get that to great? And can we get it to like almost perfect, right? And I think the justification I would use before is like, well, no movement on the court is perfect, so why does technique need to be perfect? And the Starting Strength certification and undergoing this process has kind of changed my philosophy on that a little bit. It's shown me that if you do have perfect technique or close to perfect technique, you're able to lift more weights, you're at a lower injury risk. Um, and I think those things are important, right? And it's like so weird for me to like be on this podcast and say this, because it feels like to me like I haven't been coaching technique as much, but um, it's a focus for 2024. It's something that I really want to improve upon. I want to get all our guys and girls at a really, really good spot and a really solid spot with their technique, because I don't want to just kind of say like, oh, movement's not perfect on the court, so we just want to be strong through ranges of motion. Like, yeah, it's good, and I understand there's places for that, but I think that's more like, where you want to get creative with your movement. How do you want to move through ranges of motion? Not like on the compound lifts though. If you guys understand what I'm saying, like I think I want to get better at technique. I want to get better at coaching technique. And I want to get better at, understanding that your rep is your reputation. I think that's a big deal for me. The second thing, and I think this may resonate true with a lot of the people listening to this podcast, is advocating for myself more. I was just talking with my fiance this morning. Like, it is really hard to have men's and women's basketball and divide your time equally and understand exactly how you want to uh, like show one team that you care about them just as much as you care about the other team. And I get asked to travel on trips with the men. I get asked to travel on trips with the women, and that would mean I would be leaving somebody else behind. Um, and I have women's golf as well. And so, like, my schedule tomorrow is going to be get in at 5 o'clock in the morning for women's golf, and I'll be leaving at 9:30 after 9:30 p.m. After the men's walkthrough. And so, like, that's not, in my opinion, sustainable, and it's not really okay. And I've asked for a GA, and the reason I've asked for that is because I think it will help manage my workload, right? And so, I've reached a point in my career where it's less about me proving myself, and maybe even proving myself to myself, if that makes sense. Like, I'm not nearly as concerned about people thinking I'm a good coach, because I'm confident in what I do and I like what I do, and the things that I don't like, I'm actively working on improving on. But what I want now in my career is something where I can do this for the rest of my life, because the absolute last thing I want to do is leave a job that I'm extremely passionate about and a job that I love more than anything, because I'm in conditions that I feel like I can't work. And so I've accepted the point that that schedule is not going to work for me. I'm not working 16-hour days. It's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen consistently. It can't. But that's going to happen, what, 3 days out of this week. And so in 3 days, I'm working 48 hours, right? And so, yeah, I think I did that math correctly. Okay. All right. It's just can't, like, that can't be the scenario, right? Because I'm going to burn out and I'm going to be miserable. We're in season, like right now, like we have Sundays off, which is unheard of in season, because of a Sunbelt schedule, which is fantastic. But like one day off for 6 months out of the year, and not even, it's really 3 months out of the year. And then the first 3 months of basketball, there's absolutely 0 days off because of the balance between men's and women's basketball, like from that October to December timeframe, is not sustainable. But I love the job. And so what I have to do is advocate for myself, and I have to find ways to demonstrate and show to our administration that this is exactly why I need a GA, and this is exactly why this would help me be sustained here in this position. And so I think the biggest thing for me is letting go of um, caring about other people and what they think of my coaching. Because obviously, like, my mentors and people who I respect, I'm always going to listen to them. I always want to improve, right? But I just think it's just at this stage of my career, it's much more about how can I make this last for me, because I want to be in this career forever. But I also understand that there's certain things that I'm not going to be able to sustain forever. And so I think advocating for myself is going to be the biggest thing that I'm looking for. And my urge would be to other strength coaches who are experiencing the same thing, to advocate for yourselves as well. Because every athletic department across the country talks about being elite or doing the best thing. If you're in a mid-major, it's how can we be Power Five, right? And so if you want Power Five services from me as a strength coach, you got to give me Power Five resources. And that doesn't have to come in money, but it does have to come in time and my ability to recover from my job as a coach, and then come back in and be recuperated after a weekend and be excited to come coach again. It comes in the time frame of not asking me to do much and not being spread too thin. And so I'm one of a billion in the strength and conditioning realm. So how, as we, as coaches, like, maybe we should stop being in this mind frame where it's like, man, we should just be grateful for what we have, because other coaches are struggling to find jobs, and instead advocating for ourselves and setting up a realistic career path, or asking for things that will allow you to do this career forever. Because I want to do it forever. I don't, I mean, like, my dream, dead serious, is like to be 90 years old in a wheelchair, because I don't want to walk once I'm past 90, just like rolling up and down the racks and like yelling at kids about their power cleans. Like, it's just so exciting to me. And so if I want to do that, then we have to find a way to make it sustainable. The last piece is it's a goal every single year. And it's the social media aspect of strength and conditioning, which is a double-edged sword for me, right? Because we talked about, I post on Instagram, I post on TikTok. I've gotten a good following on a couple of those platforms. And so that's come with things that are, really cool. Like I get to do ads, I get to do really cool opportunities. The social media aspect didn't help me with this, getting this podcast position. At least I don't think, I don't know, maybe they can tell you differently, but what it did do is it allowed me to, um, it opens doors for me. Social media opens a lot of doors for me, and this podcasting job is like another form of social media, right? So it's been fantastic, and it's enhanced my career. But the double edged side of it is, right, the opposite side is that I'm constantly on social media looking for content ideas, looking at what other people do, and the number one thing I do is break down my own program. And we talked about I'm confident in what I do as a coach, right? But you can be the most confident person in the world. If you're constantly looking at what other people do, you're going to start comparing yourself to them, if you're not careful. And so comparison is the thief of joy is the quote that everybody knows. But how much as a coach this year can I actually eliminate those things for myself? How much can I look at somebody else's program and say that's great for them? I don't really care what they're doing because we're doing what I know is best for our team. And we always, understand that aspect of like every team has different needs. I coach the men's team here differently than I coach the women's team. Even if it's the same program that we use, I coach it in a different way because each team has different needs. And so I'm going to look at like what Minnesota baseball is doing and be like, man, we should be doing some of these things in our program because it's cool and it's hip and it's trendy. And I don't know what I'm talking about and going down this whole rabbit hole by myself. And then all of a sudden I'm sitting there, in my bed at like 11 p.m. Like, man, I'm not good enough as a coach. Like, how did we get here to this point? Because I saw one video about what somebody else was doing with their team that, it probably isn't even applicable to my team. And so my goal is to really look at social media more as I'm somebody who produces content, not somebody who consumes content. And if I can do that, I think I'll be a lot happier and I'll be a lot more confident. And I won't put myself in those positions where I start to really compare myself to other programs. Because at the same time, like I just talked with somebody else on a podcast, and they said I'm a completely different coach from 2022 to 2023, and I'm going to be a different coach in 2024. And so, if we keep growing and getting more years under our belt, like obviously the coach who's been doing it for 20 years is going to be better than me who's been doing it for 7. Like that's how it's supposed to be. But all I can do sometimes is look at that coach and say, man, they're killing it. They're doing so much better than I'm doing. Why am I not doing this? And just getting down on myself. And I just don't think that like I want to do that anymore. And I'm opening up about that and being honest about it because I think a lot of other coaches really do it within the field. Maybe not necessarily the older coaches because, they aren't on social media as much, but the coaches around my age and the ones I talk to and the ones who I've had these conversations with, it's been pretty evident that this is something that a lot of coaches go through. So uh, it's every year I say it because I get better about it. Every year I'm not obsessed with, like what other people are doing, but I still catch myself opening that door and allowing myself to kind of go down a rabbit hole that I don't necessarily want to go down because I don't think it's, productive. Like, yeah, it's awesome to learn what other people are doing as well. And I think it can be a really good learning tool, but maybe for me at this point, it's not what I need because instead of me learning from it, I'm just going to use it to compare instead of learn. And so, I kind of removed a lot of people that I follow, and it's like, no, not at all against them because they're putting out great content. They're doing great things. But the last thing I want to do is just constantly compare myself. Um, and so that's kind of what I've got. My 3 lessons learned is that you can make an impact. You have to coach the interns and don't get caught in the rut. The 3 things I want to improve upon is technique. Also just excited to meet Mark Ribito in person. Like, I mean, I hope he doesn't make me drink a gallon of milk every day I'm there. I couldn't handle that, but um, advocating for myself, understanding that there's things I can do to extend my career and extend my livelihood, and then understand that comparison is a thief of joy and limit the social media intake that I have. And so I love the idea from our editor, Stephanie. I really appreciated the fact that she proposed this topic. I was nervous to do it. I've never, really just talked to myself on this podcast. So I hope it was productive. I hope it was enjoyable. There we go. That's a word for everybody who listened, but it was really cool to go through this process and to look at the things I've learned and then to look at the things I want to improve upon. And then hopefully next year in 2025, I'll still be the host of this podcast, which would be fantastic. And we can have another episode where I talked about the 3 things that I improved upon, and then what are the 3 things I want to look into improving upon for this next year. And I hope that those listening do the exact same thing that they did. or that I did, and looked at what they learned from the past year and how they've grown as a coach. Because I think it's really hard to give yourself credit sometimes too. And so I hope you can do that, and I can hope you have three, maybe five, maybe one thing that you want to change about yourself for the next year and grow more as a coach. Because I think we can always grow at all times. So um, I hope this can help inspire people to do that. And at the very least, I hope you got a couple laughs out of my experience this year. So uh, I'm grateful to be the host. I'm grateful for you all those who listen. I love it when people give me compliments. I mean, who doesn't, right? But uh, being this host of this show has been a really, really awesome experience. So thank you for listening, and thank you for letting me speak.